Some content or topics discussed could trigger a past anxiety or be sensitive or disturbing to listen to or view. Please view and listen with caution. Hi, my name is Todd Bly-Levin. I'm one of the hosts of the Walking Tall podcast, and it's our mission to help all people that are down and depressed or dealing with some sort of trauma or mental health issue to learn how to stand back up and walk tall again in their lives. Please follow us on all of our social platforms, our YouTube channel, and check out our Walking Tall movement at www.walkingtallmovement.com. Now, here's our show.
Welcome back to Walking Tall. If you joined us last week, hearing Todd's story was tough, really tough. But it was also inspirational to hear how he has walked tall since October 1st, 27 for others and himself, ensuring his mental health is in good order. And that is exactly what Walking Tall is about. Todd, talk to us briefly how you felt last week telling us your story, how you felt after telling us your story, and what you're excited about this week.
Well, obviously, anytime you talk about, a bad incident in your life, it's never easy to talk about, let alone, that event that took 58 lives and over 850 people injured. Afterwards, I go through a process now that EMDR taught me, just counseling, some friends, some relaxation techniques, just to kind of let my mind free up a little bit and clear up. The one thing that I think is really important and is the motivational drive for me through that whole event. And what's really kind of given me the goosebumps that I have when we talk about walking tall is that moment when I stood up in the middle of all the chaos. And at one point, I was the only person going back in, and it's the only person I could see running against the wave and picking people up and running them out. Now, there were others that got on top of people right away. There were other people like me that were going back and forth, but there were far and few between. But in that one instant where I stood up in the middle of it, and I noticed down the street all those people that came back, and then that one time when that EMT says, "Brother, we're with you. Like, you're carrying them out. We're fixing them up." Man, I get goosebumps now. The selfless acts that people came back and showed, the love, the strength, the adversity, people coming back to help others. That's what I get motivated for almost daily. It's what drives me. So I was really happy to share the story of all the adversity, but there was so much love that came out of that at the end. And Route 91, Las Vegas, the community, everybody rallied around the survivors, obviously paid tribute and did everything they could to say great things about those that fell. They're in our hearts. They're on my tattoo. I just couldn't say enough about, the first responders that came out. So I don't think I did a good job last week in really sharing that gratitude that I have towards the community, law enforcement, EMTs, the doctors, the staff, everybody that was involved. So I just want to say thank you at the bottom of my heart, and the strength that everybody had that really drives me every day. So that was last week. Chris, I know today is going to be super tough for you. I'm there for you. We're all here for you. And I don't want to say I'm excited to hear your story, but I know it's therapeutic for you, and it's going to be amazing for the listeners to hear your strength. So, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And, it's understandable while telling your story last week, Todd, that you wouldn't have thought to be so full of gratitude at the time and wouldn't have thought to thank those first responders that, of course, we all have a special place in our heart for. And I really appreciate you thinking back now on how you told your story and what you may have missed, or what are some of the thank yous you weren't able to at the time as you were emotional and telling your story, able to get those thoughts out. So that's completely understandable. And I will just say, I know with certainty, you feel an enormous sense of gratitude for those that helped you do what you did on the first. So thank you. Dr. LaRosa, I want to tell you, after watching last week a little bit and just seeing some of your reactions, hearing Todd's story, how did you feel, and what types of impacts did Todd's story have on you as a person and a professional? What were your thoughts? What were you experiencing, and what are you excited for this week?
An overwhelming bucket of emotions and thoughts I have been experiencing all week long. I walked tall with you, Todd, as you were telling that story. Great deal of empathy and caring and concern for you and for your family and for all of those people. It was absolutely emotionally a lot to deal with, a lot to process. And, I thank God for that, because without that empathy and without that ability to feel and care for others, I really don't think I would be who I am personally or professionally. It is our nature to walk tall for others, for each other. It's not easy sometimes. And I think that your story is a testament to that we're here for you. We're willing to put ourselves out there for you, to support you as we would anyone that needs us to walk tall for them. And people should know, just because we show emotion and just because we appear sad and overwhelmed, that doesn't mean we're not strong and able to walk tall, for others and for ourselves through things. So it's normal to show human emotion. It's encouraged, in fact, to express yourself when you feel it, but never taking for granted the fact that we have the strength and ability to walk tall always for one another, and with regard to what you just said, it struck me because it sounded like in that moment, you knew you weren't alone. You felt as if you weren't alone. You felt supported. You felt part of a community, and you felt part of a community of people walking tall for one another. What a powerful feeling that is. And that's most likely why that feeling stands out and keeps coming back to you and helps to pull you through to walk tall every single day. So, in a nutshell, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, and it did the same for me. What I can say is, since I was introduced to Todd, or Todd introduced himself to me on July 7th, I've shared your story, Todd. I've sent it to folks. I've been proud of what you've done, but I never heard your story. I never wanted, in all of our conversations and all of my level of pride in being your friend and one of your brothers, I would call myself, as I hope you would call yourself of me. I never wanted to hear it. I just didn't. Maybe it was due to what I experienced, but it also was, as I said, I just feel such great sorrow when people I care about, and all people for that matter, have to experience what you experienced and what I experienced and what I'm about to share. But with sadness, as I said, and sorrow and hurt, hearing your story, came a great sense of pride, as I mentioned, and in showing and knowing who you were through that day, but most importantly, knowing who you are outside of October 1st, 2017, and hearing you tell your story really empowered me to feel the strength to be able to share what I'm going to share now, actually. And so it's definitely uncomfortable. I don't know that I have yet attempted to go front to back, A to Z, my day of July 4th, 2022, but I'm going to do so. And had you not been the model, Todd, of walking tall, not only on October 1st, 2017, but what you just did for us last week, I don't know that I could be doing this right now. So I want to just say to you and say to our listeners that hearing you tell your story not only empowers me to tell mine, but it should empower others. And that's why I'm getting ready to do what I'm getting ready to do. I will say, fortunately, my story isn't as graphic as yours. However, it's unique. And one thing I've learned in my trauma, in my support groups, and using my board of directors, if you will, is it's not a contest, because you saw what you saw, Todd, and I saw what I saw. Maybe yours was more graphic in nature and more movie-like, but it doesn't mean I'm not as traumatized as you would be.
Big time.
And so what I want to say to listeners as I get ready to tell my story is that you don't ever know what somebody's going through, and it's important just to hear them and to listen to what they're feeling and what they're expressing and not judge, because it'll be very easy for our listeners to say, well, Chris, yeah, you just went and vacated a beach full of 80 people with a cliff hanging over you while the killer was on the loose and you didn't know where he was. But you didn't have a woman die in your arms like Todd did, right? And that doesn't make it any less or more traumatic for Todd or myself. And I say these things because I want our listeners to know that whatever it is you're experiencing and whatever it is you're feeling and whatever it is you've been through, it's the most important thing to you. And it's what you need to deal with. And it's not a comparison. And it's not this person has it worse than I, so I can just thwart all my feelings and not address them. So I say these things with sincerity, and I'll explain why as I start to go into my story now. But on July 4th, 2022, I woke up at about 5 a.m. as I have the last July 4ths, having served as the co-chair of the Highland Park Independence Day Parade for many years. And admittedly, I wake up going to work that day somewhat begrudgingly. It's a national holiday. It's my family's favorite holiday. There's barbecues and picnics and all these things. But here I find myself every year waking up at 5, putting on my t-shirt, my gym shoes, and getting ready to go to the parade. And it truly is never until I get there that I'm excited. And then once I get there and I see the floats and I see the kids and I see the people and the celebrations and the face painting and all these things, my spirits start to pick up and I know why I'm there. And that was no different than this past year. I was the first person in Highland Park at the Highland Park City Hall, where the meeting point is, at about 6 a.m. that morning. I was waiting on my co-chairs from the city of Highland Park, who were amazing, to meet me. Our plan from there was to go throughout the parade route and assign where the floats of that day would park and stage to get ready for the event. From there, we were going to be expecting a police officer from the City of Highland Park Police Force at about 7:15 to give a speech to all of our staff. I was responsible that day for about 35 employees. And when I say the planning efforts, this was the day of. The planning for the parade was months in advance. I went to many meetings, working with many vendors, organizing. I could tell you 1 through 61, what float was in which order. I could tell you the route of the parade. I could tell you all these things. So the preparation was there, but the day of is just like clockwork. You do the same thing. You assign the spots, the floats arrive, you work with your staff. 10 o'clock comes, we kick off. But this morning was different. And it was a beautiful day. It was sunny. People were arriving in droves. All the floats are kind of arriving and being decorated. And there happened to be this red-tailed hawk that just flew and landed on the train station. And I didn't know why. It was peculiar to me. And I'll tell at another time why this red-tailed hawk was important. But it was the first picture I took that day of the 4th of July. I took a picture of this red-tailed hawk. Don't know why, but I just did. I thought, how peculiar, how cool, this red-tailed hawk on the train station. I'm going to take a photo of it. Why not? The next photo I took was of the parade list, 1 through 61. And I sent that to all my staff members so they knew what order the parade floats had to go. So we're working through the day. 7:15 comes around. The officer is late. He's late. And I'm thinking, man, I have to have my staff out by 7:20 to close the route. So I have to move fast. So I gave the see something, say something speech that day. About 3 minutes after I dispersed the staff, the Highland Park officer came and we conversed. And I said, hey, and he apologized for being a few minutes late. I said, no big deal. He said, we were making sure that the route was secure. They were doing their detail, making sure that the route was closed, that the facility was secure, that all the horses were out blocking the streets, things of that sort. So subconsciously, when an officer says to you, we secured the route's secured. So I have no inclination in my mind that 2 hours, 3 hours from now, what I'm about to go through. So the day progresses, more floats arrive, people are happy. Kids are jovial. You got to remember, this is the first parade since 2019.
Oh,
COVID killed 2020. COVID killed 2021. This is the first parade in about 3 years. So the community is ecstatic. There's just so much pent up joy and excitement for celebrating the 4th of July. People keep coming, floats start coming, and all in total, there was over 60 of them. Some of the floats had 100 people on them. I say, we have a travel baseball program at the Park District that had their own float that day. Their float was in the 50s. It was a bright blue fire truck, and it was blaring "Born in the USA" by Bruce Springsteen. And I never want to hear that song again, because at about 10:14, 10:16, shots rang. And I was about a half a block away from the shooter, fortunately, just southeast from his location. And the parade started at 10 o'clock. Parade was 15 minutes into its schedule, and then the first shot happened. And I heard it about a half a block away, and it was peculiar. But I put my head down thinking, man, what asshole shoots fireworks at a parade? Like, that's not normal. And then I vividly remember thinking, well, the color guard, where they at? They were first in the parade, where they would have been in the route at that time, given 15 minutes or so have passed, that it was possible that the color guard was shooting blanks. But then I thought to myself, well, you know what? I've been the chair of this parade for 5 years or so. Like, they've never shot blanks. Like, why would that be? I put my head down and I heard it again. And fortunately, I had a coworker about 10 yards to what would be my right, and they looked at me in just complete, utter horror. And they said, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And so here I am now in charge of 35 people, not to mention 60 floats, thousands of people waiting to enter the parade route, thinking, oh shit, what do we do? So I looked at this person and I said, stay calm. That's the first thing I said, stay calm. And I said, push everybody south. Because if you don't know where the city hall or thereabout is compared to where the location of the shooter, it was about a block or thereabout southeast. Okay. So I heard the shots coming from the northwest. I didn't know where the shooter was. I just heard. But I said to my staff at the time, push everybody south. So this employee looked at me. They started running south. I looked at another employee. I said, go get those 50 baseball players. And I assigned him to make sure that those kids were safe. I didn't know why, but I just wanted people south. After all that started happening, chaos ensued. If you've ever seen like the running of the bulls, that's what I felt like. I felt like a mass of people were running at me to evade the shooter, vacating the scene. But what I also recognized at that time, many of those people were coming to find their kids, and they were coming to find their family members who were supposed to be in the parade, some of which who were actually in the parade. And as people start stampeding towards me, I'm running around. I'm just running like mad, yelling at people, are you okay? Do you need help? What can I do? Stopping people. And there's a few instances in that snippet of the event that I vividly remember. One being seeing a familiar face. And this person was running with their daughter, pleading with me to find their son, because their son was actually on that fire truck with the 50 other baseball players. And I had to say to that person, I'm sorry, I don't know where your son is. And that was one of the worst feelings in the whole wide world, feeling responsibility for people and children and not knowing what happened to them or where they went. But I also remember thinking that at that very moment, this person's daughter was in this bright pink tutu, as kids would wear for parades to kind of be extravagant, if you will. And the little girl had a tutu on. And I just remember like at that moment chuckling to myself, like, okay, like she's in a tutu, but after I calmed this person down and explained to her what I've done and what's going on, they moved about and I started meandering and running about again. It was about at that time, things settled a little, and I reverted back after about 10 minutes of running and helping people and making sure that they were safe and encouraging them to seek shelter and to run, fight, or hide, or to get into a safe location. I started working my way back up north towards the heart of the train station, where I met a coworker. And he was just hanging out by himself. And I had said to him, well, why are you here? And he's like, well, I don't want to leave. What if people need help? He was trying to pitch in. But I said to him, like, well, what happened? Like, I didn't even know at the time what happened. I just assumed. So I said, well, I'll tell you who will tell us, Twitter. So I got on my phone and I went on Twitter and I put in the search bar Highland Park. And boom, you saw everything. You see photos and videos, and I was 15 minutes in at that time of the event. Didn't really know what happened. I knew, I heard, I saw. I heard people's accounts of it. I saw mothers running with children screaming. I saw strollers being thrown. I saw clothes tattered. And I didn't know until Twitter, but I knew. And it was at that point where I decided, well, I got to let my family know I'm safe. So I sent a text message, a group thread, to my wife, my dad, my mom, my sisters, and I just put 2 words: I'm safe. And I didn't realize the amount of potential trauma that can cause to my family. I had assumed that they knew, but they didn't. They had no idea what was going on or what I had just experienced for 15 minutes. And the I'm safe text sent off with a thread of what's going on. Are you okay? Where are you? What's happening? So on and so forth. After that text, I put my phone back in my pocket. I started running around again as people were still coming off the parade route, still crying, still screaming, still searching for their loved ones that were supposed to enter the parade. And as I was running around, I noticed that there was a man. He had hit a tree as he was running. He had hit a tree. I immediately sprinted over to him. I let him know, my name is Chris Maliszewski. I'm the co-chair of the parade. I'm here to help. And he looked at me dead in the eye and told me, get the fuck out of here. And I'll tell you, in that one moment, if you've ever had an oh shit moment, that was an oh shit moment. Because I, again, didn't know who the killer was, where he or she at the time were located. I'm running around as best I can to help people, to make sure everybody is safe, and if anybody needs medical attention, things of that sort. And here I come upon a person I'm trying to help, and he's swearing at me, and he's angry. And I don't know if he's got a gun. I don't know what's about to happen to me. He tells me that. I reiterate one more time who I am and what I'm there to do. And there happened to be over my shoulder a female's voice. And I looked and I said, well, who are you? And she said, well, I'm his mom. And I'm like, what? Like, he was inebriated for the 4th of July. He was having a good time. He was having a little bit too much fun for 10 o'clock in the morning. But as he was running, he fell, hit a tree. He was shaken up. His mom was with him. And I looked at her and I said, I'm trying to help him. Does he need help? And she kind of looked at me with like a blank stare over her face. And I had to leave. I just went off to find somebody else because I couldn't spend the time at that point knowing other people needed attention. So from there, it was about another 15 minutes of running around, conversing with people, trying to help them locate loved ones, hearing their stories of what they just saw and heard, and thinking to myself, oh my gosh, there's so much more to do here. Mm-hmm. So from there, I called my boss. And I didn't recall this detail until a few days later, but I called his phone and it wasn't him who answered. And I was scared because I had thought he was dead. I didn't know why somebody else was picking up somebody else's cell phone. You just don't think, well, hey, this happened or that happened. Another individual who I work closely with at the Park District picked up his phone, said, I don't know where this person is, but I'm coming back to the train station, stay there. So a few minutes later go by, I'm back at the train station with the one employee I referenced who we looked on Twitter together. And here comes a white Park District van. So what folks should know is the Park District always has a float in the parade as well. Okay, we have a white van that's loaded with tchotchkes, we call them, to give away to the parade goers. And then we have a big float that our commissioners and anybody else in the Park District wants to stand on will give away the tchotchkes. So the white van comes around and there's one person driving it, and they are hysterical, absolutely hysterical, had just seen the worst of the worst. So I reach my hand in, I hold this person's hand, and I say, "You're going to be okay." And they were expressing to me that when the shots fired, they were in direct line from the killer, and they had to hide under the steering wheel. And when they got up from the steering wheel, the first thing they did was look out the window, and it was vacant. There was strollers and chairs and anything else, blankets just scrambled all throughout. But they were in close proximity to the 7. And they saw some more of the horrific occurrences of that day. So I reached into the car, held their hand, told them they're going to be okay. It was about at that time then, a golf cart pulled up that had my boss on it. And I could tell you, I was like, thank God. So we started to converse, a few of us. What was our next move? We didn't know what to do. So it was about at that point, a squad car, a sheriff pulls into the train station. And they're coming in like a bat out of hell. They pull in, almost screeching their tires, park right in front of us, essentially. And I approach the officer with my hands up like this. And I say, "Hi, my name is Chris Maliszewski. I was the co-chair of the parade. I'm not sure what's going on, but we've been telling everybody to run south." And the officer kind of looked at me like this, said, "Okay." And as he was getting out of the driver's side, he reached into his back seat, and I'm talking to him saying, "Is south the right direction?" Because I have this fear that I'm yelling at everybody to go south, that there's more people shooting, and I'm sending people into a firing line. I don't know. But I do remember at that point, he reached into his back seat and I heard it. And he said, "South is good." And I said, "Okay." And then he just ran up the train tracks. So from there, I didn't know where we go. But we knew from the officer, he also said to us, "You need to get out of here, right? You guys can't stay in this location." So we knew we needed to go somewhere safe, but we needed to organize ourselves from a park district perspective to see where our staff was at, to see what our next move was. So we went to what we felt was like the most safe hidden location in the park district's facility portfolio, because we were still not safe. The guy was still on the loose. So we went to a building. 4 of us ended up going there to converse about what some of our next moves were. We were starting to call the facilities that were open, because at the time our aqua park was open, our golf course was open, our fitness facility was open. We had many facilities that were operating as normal, and then a mass shooting occurred. They sheltered in place, they locked their doors. So we started making the rounds, and I came to find out that there was about 8 residents, users of our fitness facility, who were scared to death. They did not want to leave the rec center. They were not going to leave unless somebody drove them. So I volunteered. So I took my car at that time. I went from one building to our fitness center along with my boss. He came with me. I left him in the building because he was starting to organize what tomorrow would look like, or what the next day would look like for the park district. Because when you're running an operation or a business that the community relies on, you have to make decisions fast. You have to make moves. So he was working on that while I was actually completing tasks. So I ended up driving about 6 to 8 people from the fitness facility to their car in the parking lot that was literally only 40 yards away, not far at all. But these people were so scared to be able to just walk out in the open that I was willing to pick them up at the front door, drive them to their car. I even offered at times to follow them home. Nobody took me up on that offer, thankfully, because I was moving on to other things. But just to see the level of horror and the rate at which people were scared about what was going on in their community and not knowing the outcome yet was impactful. And it really, really, really made its mark on me. But we weren't done. So from there, we had to find out that our aqua park, our staff who operates the aqua park, was still sheltering in place, but that was also set to be the emergency response location. And what I mean by that, I'll get into a little bit. However, we went from the one facility where I was helping take people in my car to their cars to our aqua park. When I pulled into the aqua park, there was one other car at the time. It was so weird. It was like there was nobody in the lot at the time, but one car. So I park my vehicle, I walk into the aqua park, I find the staff that's sheltering in place, make sure everybody's secure. And I come back out to the main gates of the aqua park, and the person in the car approaches me. And I'm like, who the hell is this person? It's a reporter. Somebody in the media had already beat me to the emergency response location. It was very peculiar. I was very put off by it, but I just let it go. They asked me for an interview. I said no. So ultimately at that time, I went back into the aqua park, and our staff now had their computers on with the news. So I knew what was going on. And I've seen some of the scenes and things of that sort. And that now is where the community emergency response center is established. So as I'm in this aqua park, I'm watching the parking lot, a police car, a fire engine, and an ambulance from every town within 20 miles was at this location within about 15 minutes of my arrival. So now I have 3 emergency vehicles from every nearby town. And before you know it, it's a fleet. We have a fleet of ambulances. We have a fleet of fire trucks. We have a fleet of police vehicles. And now here comes the FBI SWAT team vehicles. That was the third picture I took that day. And I don't know why I took it, but I saw essentially Army Rangers coming off the bat of SWAT vehicles in a community aqua park to stop a killer. That was rattling. And I have one or two vivid memories of seeing these officers. But I remember I was wearing this hat that day. It was my little floppy sun hat. I was trying to keep the sun out of my face, right? And as these officers were arriving, and as these SWAT team members were arriving at the parking lot, I remember kneeling down almost like a catcher would and just crying. And it wasn't hysterical, but it was sobbing because I didn't know. And I just remember thinking, like you said, Todd, earlier, thank you. I just remember thinking, thank you. These men and women from the FBI, from every nearby town, every nearby city were coming to our aid. And that was impactful. So as we were working through finding our staff and things of that sort, as I mentioned earlier, I had 35 staff members working the parade that day that I was responsible for. Fortunately, many of them were able to rush to their cars, get to safety, but I had 13 staff members sheltering in place in strangers' homes. And it was at the aqua park that I started to make these calls that this was made aware to me. So I encourage my staff as best as possible to stay where they're located, and then I would find a way to get them. As I said to them, until the killer's found, you do not leave this house. Wherever you're at, as long as you're safe, as long as you're made to feel okay, you do not leave. So we agreed upon that. And about every 15 minutes or so, I checked in on those people just to make sure they were safe, that the people they were staying with were treating them well, wanted them there, things of that sort. In the interim, we were very fortunate. Part of the story I didn't say is we had a safety coordinator who had been the retired fire chief for the city of Highland Park. He was a part-time employee. He was helping us on some safety initiatives, working what would have been our festival that day for the 4th of July. It just so happened that when this occurred, because he was the former chief, he got special access into the police and fire building. So from here, I started working with him one-on-one to find ways to rescue our staff. So we're conversing. One of our other coworkers who's next to me is conversing with some other fire EMS individuals, but we develop a plan to deploy ourselves into the city to rescue these staff members. However, I say to them, I'm not going back in the community unless I have protection. I'm not going without a police officer assisting me because the guy's still on the loose and I don't know what's going on. So we develop a plan. It was about, I would say 2:00 or there that I take my last picture of the day. And it's of an FBI SWAT vehicle that looks like it was made for war. And I took that picture and I don't remember why, but looking back on it, I could think like, nobody's going to ever believe I was in this vehicle. Nobody's going to ever believe that I followed this thing down Green Bay Road, which is a side street that everybody in Highland Park goes to the restaurants and things like. Nobody's going to believe this vehicle was in their town. And I took that photo. From there, the ex-fire chief, our safety coordinator, and I get in his vehicle. We follow the FBI SWAT teams around town. to safely rescue the 13 that were sheltering in place for about 4 hours in strangers' homes. And if you've ever seen like a movie where somebody is rescued and there's like this moment of gratitude, like that was it. Seeing these guys and my staff come out of these strangers' homes and know that they're safe and secure, scared nonetheless, was that like, okay, we're doing something that's really helpful. Because those kids, and let's face it, they were kids, high school students, college students that were working the parade. They didn't know what was going on. They didn't know what could have been their fate, right? And so seeing them and just seeing the gratitude that they had for the efforts we made that day made it worth it. But we weren't done. And so we got our staff back to their vehicles. They decided to drive home, things of that sort. I go back to the aqua park and we have a group call again to find out what's going on with our facilities. Come to find out that our beach, we have a public beach that was open that day. For whatever reason, there were still about 80 people hanging out on the beach. We have a beautiful beach. Above it sits a cliff and the beach sits below, and then Lake Michigan goes out. So we were conversing with how do we vacate the beach safely and how do we get these people home? So once again, I offered my assistance. I said, I'll go to the beach, but I'm not going by myself. I just need to have security with me just in case the guy's on the beach. So we organized a plan. About an hour and a half, 2 hours after that, I find myself once again with our safety coordinator, with detail following us to the beach. And I volunteer to start walking around on the beach and talk to people. So I make my presence known right away. I get out of the car. I walk up on the beach like I did to the officer with my hands. I put my hands wide out and I screamed, "My name is Chris. I work for the Park District. There's a mass shooter on the loose and you need to leave." And it was really peculiar to me because people were just kind of looking at me like, who are you? Right? Like, what are you doing here? So I took it upon myself and I started walking up to these groups and having conversations with them. It was so weird because I would say to them, like, do you not know that a mass shooting just occurred 5 hours earlier, not less than a mile and a half from here? These people didn't care. They knew. Like, they literally knew, but were so separated from the event that they didn't care. They wanted to celebrate their 4th of July. They wanted to be in the lake. They wanted to drink their beer, have their barbecue. So I had to express to them, like, no, this isn't a safe location. I have to ask you to leave. You need to leave now. So we did that for about an hour, having conversations with people. And if you could just imagine people fighting with you to vacate a beach while a killer is on the loose, it's unimaginable, right? Like, I had to convince people, please leave. Like, I'll drive you home, whatever you need. But meanwhile, I'm always looking over my shoulder, like, what's above me? So it took about an hour for the beach to vacate. And what I haven't said and what I didn't want to say is that because I was with the former fire chief, who has our safety coordinator, we were able to access the parade route in a manner others weren't, because we had to get from point A to point B. And so with his security and his badge and those things, we're driving through the parade route to get to our locations. It was in some form or fashion, some of the only ways we could. So I'm seeing at this time, once again, the parade route, the blankets, the chairs, the strollers, the chaos, on a continual basis, working to rescue staff, to vacate the beach, to come up with plans for the next day. So after about an hour or so at the beach, and vacating and locking the gates and things of that sort, I get back to Hidden Creek, the aqua park. It's now about 4:30. And we were asked to bring some materials over to the officers and things of that sort. And at about 5:30 or so, we had our plans in place for how we were going to operate the park district for the next day. We had our plans in place. All of our staff was secure. All of our staff we knew where they were. things of that sort. So at about 5:30, we helped carry some folding tables and chairs and some food, because at that time now, you got to remember, the American Red Cross is on site. Everybody, the local grocers are sending cases of water and chips and cookies and everything. So everything you see on the TV or movies when a trauma or an event like this happens, that's what's really happening.
Mhm.
5 hours later, we're turning down sandwich trays and things of that sort, right? So we were asked to help set that up for the officers and EMS vehicles. And so we did that. And one of the last memories I have of being in the aqua park is looking at an officer, and he's on a drone. And I'm like, what is he doing? And they're like, searching for the guy. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Wow.
Like, so here I am next to an officer on a drone with a camera, literally searching for the killer. So after we gave the folding chairs and tables and food to the officers, our operation was all set for the next day. We decided it was time for us to go home. So it was at about 5:45 or thereabout. The four remaining staff members for the park district who were there decided to go home. So I got in my car, didn't turn the radio on. And if, as listeners, and Vanetta, you and Todd get to know me, you'll know I love music. But me not listening to music is not ordinary. And so I had the most silent drive I've ever had in my life on the way home that night. And meanwhile, as the day's going on, I'm certainly in touch with my family and letting them know where I'm at. Other coworkers are asking for my, where my location is. Am I safe? Everybody's encouraging me to leave to go home, but I'm not. And part of that day, my wife and kids had planned to go to her brother's house for a barbecue, and they hadn't left yet after the shots. And so we were conversing, and she said, well, do you want me to stay home? And I said, no, go, because what are you going to do at home? What are you going to do? So they went. And when I got home from the drive that night, it was a vacant, empty house. And I got in the shower and I collapsed. I fell into the fetal position and I cried like I never cried before. My family got home about 45 minutes or so after, and I put my best face on. I didn't talk much about what had just experienced. I wanted to hear more about the barbecue my kids just had and the fun they just experienced. And I put everybody to bed.
Wow. It's amazing. For me, God, it put me right back in that moment. And I was walking with you through your entire ordeal. Chris, you started walking tall the second that you heard that first shot. Your first instinct was to make sure that people were safe. And you have to wear that armor with you for the rest of your life. Your true character came out and your true passion in helping others in a time of total chaos and adversity. I commend you, and I'm so proud of what you did. It was just nonstop. It was one story after another on how you're just bobbing and weaving and staying focused. And, that was the difference between your story and mine. I didn't get to see what the staff and the organization and preparation and everything that went into that instant decision-making process to help others. And you were right there with that. You had some really scary moments that I know I felt with you. I was getting goosebumps with it when, you're staring at that person and he's angry and mad at you and you don't know who that is, the profiling that happens right off the bat, but you're scared to death of your life. And you probably almost went into a defensive mode and then had to figure out, okay, I'm fine. And your ability to move on from that, you assessed there's other people that need help. That another example of, okay, you're fine. That person's going to get up. You're going to walk tall for somebody else. The the helping just of the rescue staff and them coming out, that feeling of them knowing you're there, they're never, ever going to forget that for the rest of their lives. That feeling of community, your driving force to go make sure that those people were safe. You gave that to them. And I'm not trying to pat you on the back as much as I am right now, but the other part's walking, into an empty road or some sort of, that's scary. At the end of my night, I felt the same thing. And the song, I'm right there with you. I understand, the Born in the USA is always going to be something that is probably going to bring you back to that event, unfortunately. And I have mine with a song that Jason Aldean sang the night of my event. You just it was one story of courage after another, and you kept your boots moving forward, which is what anybody would ever want, right? If you're hurt and you're in need, you want someone that's going to be able to stand up and keep moving and don't stop, because they need that. Not everybody can do that. So I'm so proud of you on what you did. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to do that. Obviously you go and, you shelter, you do what is comfortable for you. You secure yourself, you secure your family. But man, that was a lot to take in.
Yeah. And I feel, Vanetta, I'm holding off to give it to you. Yeah, I felt, and just in telling that, what I just expressed, it wasn't organized how I explained it just now. And I think we could talk more about that on a different show, but yeah, those were the highlights. Those were the things I can, at this point, 8 months after, I can put my finger on and say, yeah, I did that, or yeah, that happened. The little details within right now are still fuzzy, and I'm still working through those. Is that how it goes, Doctor?
I was going to jump right to intellectualizing the situation, because that is a defense mechanism. But I will add that information a little bit later.
Is that what you're saying I'm doing?
No, that's what I was just planning to do. To dissociate myself for a moment. But there's so many thoughts that went through my head. And, the very first one is that I'm sure people have told you this across your lifespan, but there's something about you that just conveys caring. It's almost like instantaneously meeting you, I know that you care. I don't know how that's possible, but you exude that. You do. And in the middle of a crisis or a trauma, such as, what you have both experienced, there's nothing better for a person than to come into contact with someone like you, where they know in that moment, amidst all the chaos and turmoil and fear, that someone cares. And that feeling goes so far and so deep for so many. And, that's what I know you gave to everyone that you came across on that particular day. Another thing that strikes me and was striking me throughout your whole story was your flashbacks of everything good that you pulled out of the crowd. The little girl in the tutu, the kids, the families, the strollers, the groups. So much of you is positive and good that it's hard to reconcile how something so evil, horrific, and horrible and hurtful to our society, to those people we love, is happening all around us. And you really paint such a picture, being after the pandemic, how people were really just starving for that human connection, affection, socialization, all the things that make us human and feel alive and connected with each other. That's all that people wanted in their innocence, and were struck with the events, of that day. And you're processing this whole thing. And as Todd said, you're living this situation to go and help those staff members who God could be my son's age, or Todd, your son or daughter, and you're helping those kids. And by doing that, you're giving comfort to their families. And, thank you so much for caring about all those people.
Well, I will say, as I kind of get into the aftermath, the caring was absolutely mutual. You're right. I cared immediately. That's just who I am. That's just the way it's going to be. But throughout that day, what I didn't say is the amount of outreach I've had from friends and family who knew where I worked, who knew I was in town, was overwhelming. It was absolutely overwhelming. It was overwhelming so much so that throughout that day, I had to assign various, my wife, okay, hey, you inform these 5 people what's going on and let them know not to bug me. Or, hey, Ryan Brownlee, as a matter of fact, Todd, I put him on the task and I said, hey, Ryan, you need to let Coach Dom know and Zach Dill, you need to know all my guys know that everything's okay, because my phone is just blowing up, right? And the text messages are piling up. And so that in itself was powerful for me to know that people care. And talking about people caring, what I'll say is, that day, what was eye-opening to me in that respect was my neighbors. People who we're neighborly with, they're our friends, but the amount of outreach and support they provided to my family was so comforting, because it gives me the relief to know that if something should ever happen to me, that my family will be okay. And that's so powerful, just so powerful. But yeah, so after I got home that night, put my family to bed, I sat and I didn't know what to do with myself. I had conversations with people who were checking in on my safety. I had text exchanges with folks. I'm fortunate to know some people on the West Coast. So as the night progressed and as it became 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, my buddy was getting off work. So I'm on the phone. So I'm able at that point to stay engaged and not kind of sit back and think about what just happened. I'm able to just keep communicating with people, which by nature is who I am. So it felt good. But I didn't sleep that night at all. And part of the organization and the efforts on the 4th of us organizing things, we're trying to find ways to get immediate trauma counseling to our organization the very next day. And so what we had organized was some counselors from a group called the First Responders Counseling Center. I think the name escapes me, but Todd, you've met Lou. And they came out of nowhere. A few counselors and therapists came to start having these support group sessions. The first support group session was for those directly involved at the parade. We had about 15 or 20 people show up. Everybody kind of accounted for their experience, told each other their stories to help that healing process. It was just so interesting to hear other people's stories, because as they were telling their stories, I envisioned what I was doing at the exact moment they were telling about what they were doing. And so the picture is now starting to get more whole. But that was very, very tough to hear people I care greatly about and work with on a daily basis' experiences and the horror and that they have that was brought to them. That was just crushing, absolutely crushing. So we had 2 support group sessions on July 5th, which were fantastic. And they were what was needed. People opened up, people expressed their experience, people sympathized, empathized, hugged, cried, whatever you needed, we did it. But there again, the American Red Cross, all these organizations are just filling us with food and goodies and all these things, which keeps you going. It keeps you going. It really does.
Yeah.
The next day we had planned on July 6th to really hunker down, take the attention off ourselves and focus on the community in the organization. So we had operational conversations with what would be our path forward for the next coming days, for the next coming weeks. So we got through those not easily. There was varying opinions about what we should do, how we should handle the circumstance. At times they got heated. But that was very stressful in itself, because various people are advocating for one thing, various people are advocating for another, and all of us are traumatized at the exact same time. right? So now you have a group of people in a room who can't even collect their own thoughts, trying to think in an organized fashion about what to do. That doesn't work very well.
Was the shooter caught at this point?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I guess I never did say that. I apologize. That's my bad storytelling coming through.
Well, there's a reason for that. I want to answer that in a minute.
Yeah, he was caught that night. So what I would say is, after I got out of the shower, which I collapsed, my family was home and consoling me. I didn't want to see the news. But it was about an hour and a half or so after I had got home, my family was home, that my wife had said they caught him. And so that night on July 4th, I think it was 6:30, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, somewhere in there. I don't know. But they did catch him. So yeah, Vanette, I apologize.
Oh no. Just
so we decided on July 6th what we were going to do for our operations, which was stressful in itself, but we all had a plan that we agreed upon and that we activated. July 7th, I woke up and just felt terrible. I hadn't slept in 2 days. And when I say I hadn't slept, I mean I had not slept. I did not close my eyes. And after all the stress from the day before, I had finally broken and told myself I needed to go to the, I forget what they called it at the time. It was the Community Resource Center that was located at the high school. They brought in counselors, they brought in the American Red Cross, they brought in the Attorney General, they brought in all this. And finally I said, I need to go speak to somebody. So I go to the resource center. You walk into the hall of the high school, there's stuffed animals lined down the halls for the kids that come, and there's all these provisions for people, food, water, fruit, whatever you need. But you got to register. You got to fill out your name. You got to fill out your phone number. You got to fill out your address. You got to fill out. It's weird. It just didn't feel comforting, but I did it because I thought that's what I had to do. Filled out that piece of information, gets sat in this other location. Finally, a therapist comes to talk to you, and they give you a map. Where were you that day? And I have to point where I was. And what was your role? Were you there as a spectator? Were you there as and I said, well, I was there as an employee. I was the co-chair. And they asked more poking questions, very off-putting. It's not empathetic. It's more factual at this time. They're trying to build the case. So I tell them at the time, I was the co-chair. Here's what I did, similar to what I just expressed now. They whisk me away. They take me away. And they bring me to the Attorney General. So now here I am at a table of the Attorney General's office, filling out new paperwork, my name, my address, all these things, my role in the shooting, all these things. I'm like, why am I doing this? I'm just here to talk. Like, I'm literally here to just tell people how I'm feeling and get tips how to go to sleep, literally. Yeah. So after I fill this out, they give me the rundown. Well, you were a victim and you're this and this and that and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, can I just talk to somebody? Literally. So they take me away and they try to have me speak to another counselor in an open room where there's other people, right? Which I'm not downplaying the impact that could have, but that wasn't for me at that time. I wanted to break down and I didn't want to do it in public. So I asked the counselor, hey, can we go in a separate room? So we went in a separate room, had about a 30-minute conversation, and she said, okay. And I was thinking, like, what's next? Like, what's my next step? There was none. Literally, there was none. They put me on my way. But that, Todd, was the same day you texted me, July 7th. And so later on that day, I get that text from you that I read out loud last week that really helped, in a sense, not to a great degree, but in a sense, change my path. Right. I knew at that point there was somebody like yourself who cared, who had experienced what you experienced, who took the time to listen to Ryan ask you to call me, then took the time to actually text me. Right. Like, that changed my path immediately because I knew I wasn't alone. Right. I knew I had a resource. So talking about my passion for music, I was telling Todd a story before we got on this show today. He asked what my shirt was, and it's any anytime we're on the show, there's going to be some music reference. I'm just going to say that to our listeners. There's going to be some Easter egg where you're going to be like, why is Chris wearing a Rage Against the Machine t-shirt today? But I had tickets dating as far back as 2019 for the reunion tour of Rage Against the Machine. Long story, one of my favorite bands of all time. I was so excited. Well, the concert got rescheduled many times for July 9th, 2022. So here I am, 4 days after a mass shooting, holding a ticket in a mass crowd to one of my favorite bands of all time, not knowing what to do.
Did you go?
I did. I went. I went by myself. And it was the scariest experience of my life. I get to the concert. I had 3 plans of exit. I had my back to the wall. I had every vigilant surveilling mechanism in my life that I've ever had. But I went, right? And so this is kind of like my little badge of honor. This is the t-shirt I got from that day going to the Rage Against the Machine concert. But having Todd's strength and knowing that he was okay and hearing his voice that week and hearing his text, I talked to Todd about going to that concert that week, and he was like, dude, you probably shouldn't go. And I never even told him I went, frankly, right? A
lot for the brain.
Yeah, but truly it was an opportunity for me to see where I was at. And that's how I was visioning it, right? It was probably medically, Dr. LaRosa, the worst thing I could have ever done. And I get it, but it was where I was at that time, thinking like, hey, this guy is not going to steal this from me. Like, I had been waiting for 3 years, as stupid as it sounds, to go to this dumb concert. This is not going to change that for me, right? Probably traumatize myself worse, frankly, but it was a badge of honor. And I feel great that I was able to do that, because I was looking back now at where I'm at with my mental health and where I was at then, to say, hey, if I could do those things then, what am I capable of now? Right? What am I capable of now? And so about 2 weeks later, I tell this story. It harkens back to my love of music. But what listeners may not know, in Highland Park, there's a tea shop called Madame Zuzu's, and it's owned by the lead singer of the Smashing Pumpkins, Billy Corgan, and his wife. And I become friendly with them over time. They have young kids. We have young kids. We've interacted at various occasions. But about a week and a half after the shooting, I get a text message from Billy Corgan's partner, who was soon to be his wife. Hey, can I talk to you? And I'm like, yeah, sure. What's up? And she's like, hey, we're getting ready to do this charity event, and we don't know where to dedicate the money to. So here I have now Billy Corgan and his wife reaching out to me. They're getting ready to do this concert, this benefit that they're streaming worldwide to raise money for the Victims Response Fund. And they're asking me, like, where's the money supposed to go? So I'm like, hey, it needs to go to Terry Olean and the Highland Park Community Foundation. They have a Victims Response Fund. I'll connect you. So within an hour, I text Terry, I text Chloe and Billy, and they're in touch. And that day they established the charity. And that's what this concert poster is for. So I know listeners can't see it, but the poster behind me is from the Together and Together Again benefit concert that was on July 27th at Madame Zuzu's. They raised about $500,000 for the Victims Response Fund that night on a streamed worldwide concert. Billy Corgan played, Jimmy Chamberlain, Perry Farrell was there from Jane's Addiction, so on and so forth. But the coolest part of all that is they did a rehearsal on the 26th of July for victims and first responders. So they dedicated 10 tickets for this event to the Park District. I was responsible for allocating the tickets to my staff, and they put on a concert, a rehearsal concert, but it was a concert for the worldwide streamed event that was going to be the next day. So I was very fortunate to be able to take 10 staff members to the rehearsal. And then the next night I was invited and went to the main streaming event with my dad. And so now things are starting to take shape, but the point of the matter is I'm just still going, right? I went to the next day of this support group. I went to this next day of a support group. I went to a concert. My mind is still working. But guess what I'm not doing? Not taking care of Chris. I wasn't. I was focusing on everybody else, and I was not taking care of me. So much so that we had a team meeting, and I'll say one more quick story. In September, we were approached by this networking group. They were doing another fundraising event for the Victims Response Fund, didn't really know what to do, how to go about their organization, reached out to the Park District for assistance. I've worked some charity events for our organization. They said, hey, you need to talk to Chris. I got put in touch with this networking group, come to find out what their function was, how. Long story short, I emceed the event and I did the live auction. We raised about $15,000 that night for the Victims Response Fund, right? It was an awesome event. It was so exciting. It was invigorating to see all these people continuously moving forward to benefit the community. But once again, I wasn't doing anything for myself. And so in December, I guess I should say in November, we had a team meeting just to check in with everybody. Hey, we're starting a new year in 2023. We're going to start talking about the 4th of July again. How is everybody doing? And it was very evident to me at that time that our team was struggling. We had a lot of employees who had not addressed their own issues. They've been so busy, like I was, working to benefit everybody else and get through what they had just experienced. They weren't taking time for themselves. And so it was in that meeting that a few of my staff members had said, like, hey, it felt really good to have this meeting and talk about what we're not doing or what we are doing. We want to do more of that. So I said, okay, let's start a support group. So in December of 22, we started a support group. We meet every 3 weeks. My therapist, Lou, comes and she monitors the situation. She manages the conversation. We have about 10 employees on an every 3 week basis that come. And that support group has just been so powerful. Awesome. But once again, I wasn't doing that for me. I was doing it to help everybody else. And then in December, I was at a wedding in Arizona. And, my grandmother on my mom's side, my grandmother Josephine, she was it for me, right? She was it. She moved back to Chicago a long time ago, so on and so forth. But anyways, I was in Arizona in December. I get a call from my mom that my grandma's got to go in hospice and she doesn't have long to make it. So I said, okay, I'll get on a plane. I'll come home. My mom said, no, she's got some time. Go to the wedding tomorrow. You'll come home on Sunday. You could say your goodbyes then. I said, okay. Saturday comes by. She's fine. She makes it. Sunday morning, wakes up. We're getting ready to fly home. She's still alive. I'm literally boarding the plane. She's still alive. I land. She's dead. So I didn't get to say goodbye to my grandma. That one really hurt. That one just really hurt me for many reasons. But that one just broke me because I just wanted to say goodbye. That's all I wanted. And I couldn't. So finally, we have the services, the holidays occur, the new year goes by, and January 16th happens. And I just have this overwhelming feeling of what the is going on with me and what good is going to happen from all this just utter chaos I just had experienced. And I text Todd and I said, hey, have you ever thought about doing good from all this? And he responded with, yeah, all the time. What do you got? And here we are.
Walking tall.
Walking tall.
Hey, so you asked me, first of all, I'm sorry that your grandma passed away.
Yeah, it happens to all of us.
Well, yeah, but it's never easy. And I think, the one thing that, and this goes into this text that I'm about to read you, in American culture, and I think we've talked about this too, and Vanetta, love to hear your insight on this, on grieving, right? And the experience of trauma. And now, like I mentioned in my podcast on how the flowers are just brighter and everything's just better and more crisp in life, right? And now you lose somebody that is so important to you. I'm sure that was even more doubly impacted. Yeah. But you asked me one time what Ryan had texted me. So do you want to hear it?
Yeah.
He sent me on July 7th at 1:54 p.m. He sent me your contact information. Said, player I coached at Iowa and coached with there, runs Highland Park District and was in the shooting last week. I gave him your number to reach out to you. I said, oh man, that's tough. Was he okay? And is his family okay? He said, he and his family are fine. If you don't hear from him in the next couple of days, I would reach out. He is going to try to go to therapy, but talking to him, similar to you, where he can't really piece much together from a trauma response. I said, okay, thank you, Ryan. July 7th at 8:11 p.m., I said, hey, Ryan, Chris reached out to me. And he mentioned that he didn't want to be a bother, but he sounded like he was going through some stuff that I know from that horrible experience, what he is thinking, where his mind is right now. So I told him to give me a call and we can talk. I just wanted to let Ryan know. He said, I coached him and coached with him. He is a longtime friend. He broke down on the phone with me today. I said, it's good you're there. He will need to talk about it and know it's all okay not to get over this right away. He's going to go through a lot mentally for a long time. I'm here for him if he needs to talk. Have a good night. He said, thank you. This doesn't go away. That's the whole, right? I mean, you have friends, you have this support system. Ryan cared so much about you. He reached out to me knowing what I had gone through to make sure that I'm there for you. It was up to me to say yes. And Vanetta, you alluded to this in the beginning. It's in our nature to help. It's in our nature to stand tall for people in need. But in a time of grieving, like, you tried to take time for you. You went, you gave yourself up. You took off all your armor and you said, hey, I need help. You just didn't get it at the right moment, right? Because maybe process something else. They wanted something else from you that was going to help them. And you didn't get what you needed, right? Then you lose your grandma, and it's not, you don't have to get over this, no matter what it is, right? Vanetta, I mean, I'm just trying to like show that there's these people that are really caring for you, and you get this support. And not once did Ryan say, he needs to get over this tomorrow. We need to get him back on the baseball field. We need to get him back into work. You kept going to work. You kept doing things to help people out, and your own support team, and building, all these cool programs and fundraisers, and kept yourself busy. But at some point, you had to take that step to which you are now for yourself. But the grieving part doesn't have to go away tomorrow, right? I mean, I'm still grieving. I grieve almost every day from my thoughts. And I pray for those, innocent souls that lost their lives that night in my horrible experience, let alone praying for the people that lost their lives in yours. We don't have to get over this as a society. We just have to make sure we're there for each other.
Yeah,
Indeed, Todd. And Chris, you said a few very key things in your recollection of all of this. You almost seem like you were in a manic state where you just kept going and going and going and going, trying to help, trying to process, trying to do, trying to be, trying to exist the way that you were before. And all the while, as you were doing that, the parts of you that needed to grieve, because you brought up grieving, Todd, weren't allowed. They didn't have those parts of you didn't have the space to do that. Grieving happens in so many ways, shapes, and forms. And obviously, it's not just from the loss of a loved one like your grandma. It's the loss of your dream and belief in society and that day. It's your vision of that day and everything that surrounded it for people on the 4th of July. It's born in the USA. It's you're grieving. You're grieving those things. You're not just grieving one thing. You're grieving memories. You're grieving things that made you happy in that moment. And then you felt guilty about being happy about those things. You're going through trauma. And so you try to dissociate yourself from all of those things that you were experiencing that made you feel good, because people feel guilty about feeling good in the face and amidst, such circumstances. And when we think about memory and we think about why you're still piecing all this together, there's a reason for that. People who experience trauma go through various types of what's called dissociative amnesia. One type of memory is called episodic memory. Episodic memory is kind of like the events as they happen in a movie. Like you're telling the events of a scene or a situation. And people become amnestic of events. And that's why sometimes it's hard to put that timeline back together. And that's why everything sort of, fuzzes together. And not only to mention when certain memories or thoughts come back, our defensive mechanisms may want us to dissociate from those things again, because we might feel too much anxiety, too much depression, trauma, whatever else have you. And being sort of in a manic state, like you sounded like you almost were, it's a protective mechanism. It's a way to not have to think and not have to piece those things together. But also what you do naturally for yourself is really, you sounded more like a therapist here than not.
No, I'm not.
You might need an honorary degree or something, but you go towards the anxiety, towards the experience, towards the trauma, because it's kind of like a bully. You want to understand it, you want to deal with it, you want to see what it can do to you, because you want to walk tall for yourself, and you deserve that. And continuing to reach out to people and begin your therapeutic journey, continuing to go to the groups, being with your personal therapist, doing the EMDR. You're finally walking tall for yourself. And that makes me so happy, and that's one thing I wanted to say about Todd too, that affected me about your story, is the one thing I'm just so happy about is that you had and are having a successful therapeutic journey. And remember, like we said last time, the long-term memory is a vast warehouse of unknown capacity. We're never going to get over the things in life that have caused us grief and trauma. Never.
Yeah.
And and loss of grandma is not less than, anything else, just because everyone experiences it and life and death are a part of our human existence.
Yep.
No way, shape, or form does that make it digestible when you love someone to that extent. My grandmother was my best friend as well. And, I'll talk about my experiences another day, but when you lose someone, you've all heard about the stages of death and dying, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you go through denial and bargaining and denial. I'll have to refresh my memory.
We'll get to it another time.
I'll torture myself until I remember the full sequence I just had. But Elizabeth Kubler-Ross did a lot of extreme close-up investigation in terms of death and dying. She actually stayed around hundreds of people as they actually went through the dying process. And she was with them, holding their hand as they crossed over. And she is an expert on this. If you ever want to read a book that will truly inspire you, it's called The Cycle of Life. And she talks about how she firmly believes when people are passing over, that they're in a state of complete peace and happiness. And, a lot of times people choose when they want to go. My dad, I was with him in hospice in his house in Arizona because they moved there and retired from New York. And I was with him nonstop for days. The second I walked out of the room to research cancer treatments, he was gone. He wanted to go when I wasn't there. And I knew that. But saying goodbye is what you do every day in the love that you show to people. They know that they're going to be missed. They know that they're loved. And she knew that, you were coming to say goodbye. She just didn't want to do it herself.
Yeah.
Wow.
Todd, you were trying to say something?
I'm just amazed. I mean, we can go through these crazy stories, and then you have Vanetta that just kind of like calms it all down, brings this structure to it, and then, just is uplifting. So the way in which you're describing the stories, and the way you're allowing us to understand why we were feeling a certain way is it's remarkable. So thank you. It's comforting.
Yeah, we definitely need it. And like you were saying, Dr. LaRosa, in fact, I have just this past Monday, I had my second EMDR therapy session. Didn't go as well as the first. I will say, like, I was very resistant. The first session, I got the paddles in my hand, and as soon as that light bar turned on, I was a puddle. Like, I was just waiting, literally just waiting for my feelings to express themselves and come out of me through crying and whatever other physical reaction I wanted to have. I was just waiting. And then this past week, I was trying to hide it. I was trying to fight it. I didn't want those emotions. So it was exhaustive because it took me a good 20 minutes to get in that place where I could become vulnerable again, because I was just protecting myself so badly mentally, excuse me, that I wouldn't open my brain up to allow the EMDR to do its job.
Look how long you've done it. It's your primary defense mechanism. It's what you do. You go into overdrive, you begin planning, helping people, thinking of others, figuring out, thinking, doing. You're a very creative person. So your brain is occupied. And when your brain is occupied, you can't process all that stuff. And then it comes to your therapeutic session and you're supposed to just turn all that on and put everything else aside. And that's not easy to do, and so you could do some things for yourself. You could prep yourself, a couple of days, like do a countdown before your next session and talk to yourself and give yourself a plan and make a plan to go in there in the state that you need to be to fully receive your help to the best of your ability. Just know your antecedents, know your defense mechanisms, know what you usually try to do to divert yourself. And those are the things you could fight yourself on, right? So you can get the most out of your session.
Sure. Todd, did you have those kinds of experiences when you were, in your initial EMDR experience?
Yeah, it was really, I knew I needed help really bad. It's very, very, very tough for me to let it go. And I fought it, but my angel, my therapist, Diane, she allowed me to feel safe, feel comfort. My second, third session, when you were talking about that, Vanetta, as I was driving to the therapist's office, I started to kind of prep myself on what I wanted to try to accomplish. And I started almost mentally put myself on that couch. So as I walked in, I kind of already been there and I was almost a little bit more relaxed. And the way she just kind of guided me, mine was very prolonged. Like I went, over a year, a lot of EMDR with the paddles, the vibration therapy. And then we would have a conversation, maybe sometimes like every third or fourth, where it was just conversation and no actual like devices or anything. But yeah, that's been my experience. The 2 times I've done it now, the vibration paddles, those types of things. But, we've only been through, I think we got to the point this past Monday where I text my family. Right. So we still have a whole bunch of stuff to work through. And I gave all of us today like a higher level, dissociated story.
When you tell the story, I know you're telling it and you are feeling it, but you're dissociated enough to be able to tell it.
Yeah.
And that you have to be almost, because it was so traumatic and fearful for you. And, give your brain a little high five right now, because, it's doing a damn good job for you. For both of you.
I've been doing that my whole life, right?
Yeah. Right. The Italian.
Yeah. No, I mean, I just, as we kind of wrap up today's show, I want to just say thank you both for listening, for making me feel safe to be able to do this. I haven't done this ever, frankly. I think I've done it in spurts. Yeah.
Well, we're happy to be here for you. And that's the whole movement we're creating right now, right? It's, we're walking tall together. We're walking tall for those that can't stand up right now. And the whole goal is to get everybody to walk tall together, right?
Yeah. You guys did that for me today.
Good job.
I lost my train of thought a little bit there thanking you guys, but yeah, thanks. Thanks to our
Doesn't
listeners for listening, and thanks for making me feel safe. And Vanette, I promise you, next week, when we hear your story and how you've walked tall professionally and personally, and the wide experiences you've had to get you to be what we call a world-renowned brain expert, whether you like it or not. And so
You're our world renowned.
you're our world. That's it. So anyways, I want to encourage everybody, please tune in next week as we hear Dr. Vanetta LaRosa's impactful story, how she's walked tall professionally and personally her entire life. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see everybody next week. Walk tall.
Walk tall, everybody.
Walk tall.
Walk tall. We'd like to thank our sponsor, The Balance Project. Check them out at www.thebalance-project.org. Thank you so much for being a proud supporter of the Walking Tall movement.